At 12 years old, he knew that he was nearly a man, and with his one good hand he would reach over, but he could still feel the arm that had been taken from him. He'd been hooking up behind the rolls, and his arm had been caught and taken away from him. And now, as he awoke inside of the bed that he shared with two of his brothers, he knew that another day's work would start. It was a hard job. Not that it was a physical job, but just the fact that he felt so alone. He'd have to sit and wait and watch and look towards the clock, the great clock tower that seemed to be like a great eye that looked out in 4 directions all over the whole of the valley. His job would be to make sure that the gate was opened and closed at the right time. He would look up to the clock. He would watch the hands ticking and moving, and he knew the times of all of the trains as they brought things in to the steelworks and out. All of the things that they needed, the coal, the limestone, the iron ore. He knew the drivers. Many of the drivers would befriend him. He was like their mascot. But now he was nearly a man, and the only job that he could do, with only one good arm, was to open and close the gate. The foreman didn't like him. The foreman had a son about the same age as him, and he wanted his son to be working on the gate. He wanted his son to get the few pennies that he was getting for the work that he did. So he never let up. He was never off his back, always shouting, screaming, yelling, bawling, howling, hollering at him that the work that he did wasn't good enough, that the gate was closed too early, the gate was closed too soon. As he dried himself in front of the fire and warmed his clothes, he looked all around. The house was made of stone. Stone floor, stone walls, stone slate above him. You could tell that this was to make sure that the house didn't burn down. Well, sometimes as he got himself ready, he would wish that he could go back in time, to the time when he had 2 good hands and arms. But he was grateful that he had a job at all. He wondered, when he did become a man, what his work would be, whether he would have to spend the rest of his life with one arm, opening and closing the gate for the trains. Everything was sparse inside of the house, but those things that did belong to him, he kept them close inside of a tin. He had a candle that was just his, so that he could sit by the window, look out, listen to the trains, watch the clock. And for one last time he reached over and could feel nothing. He walked to work. As he looked up towards the clock, it was chiming, as always. If anything, he was slightly early, and he couldn't understand why it was chiming just a little out of time, but it gave the foreman a chance to shout at him. If the train were to be on time, then I expect the gate to be on time, which means you. And the foreman prodded him with his hard, heavy finger. It wasn't just the clock that let this boy know what the time was. He'd sat there, isolated, so many times that it was almost, if we were to place him anywhere and at any time, day or night, he would be able to tell you within a minute what the exact time was, whether it was the position of the moon or the stars or the sun or the way that the clouds would roll over the hills. But he knew the time almost as well as the clock did. But he was jealous. Jealous of his friends, for this was a Sunday, and he wished that he could have gone to the Sunday school, but he could not choose. The foreman would often say, "Beggars cannot be choosers, and you're lucky to have a job at all." But his friends would be in Sunday school, and he'd been a few times, no, not often, But now on this Sunday, he was there, sitting, frightened about his future, wondering what use he would be when he did become a man. But he knew he was happier being in this place rather than underground. He'd heard the stories of the ironstone miners. He'd heard the stories of how they would put powder underground and blast away great pillars of iron ore, and boys and men would have to scramble over it and put it into wagons and drag it up. Perhaps he could be a horse boy, but still he was grateful that he did have a job. He looked. He didn't have a watch. The clock did not seem to have moved its hands or pointers, and he knew that there was a train due soon. He could have told you the whole of the timetable off by heart, and yet the clock was not showing the right time. In the distance he could see that the cooks were cooking, that there was steam arising, and he knew his mum worked inside of there. He knew that she would be working, and all he thought about were the scraps that she would be able to bring back home for them all to eat. But still the clock, and now he stared at the clock, almost willing the hands to move. And for once in his life, he trusted his own feelings, emotions and senses. He jumped down from off the gate and opened it, just as the foreman was screaming, "What do you think you're doing? Look at the time! Can you see it's not ready yet? The gates have to be open on time, they have to be closed on time," and his words almost choked in his throat, for the train came steaming through just as he had opened the gate. He had trusted his senses. He had trusted his emotions and feelings. And it was as the train rolled through, and the foreman on the other side of the track could be seen as the train had gone past, he looked. The owner came to praise the foreman for his quick thinking. And for once in his cross-tempered life, the foreman told the truth and pointed to the boy and said it was him. The owner was so grateful that he gave the boy something. It was small, it was round, it could fit into the palm of his hand. He gave it to the boy himself. "You boy, you have saved the company and me a lot of money and grief. I will give you this." The boy looked at it and wondered what it was. It was silver. And he flicked it open and saw that he had been given a watch. "That's just in case," said the owner. "That's just in case, perhaps, the clock stops again." The boy would fit it inside of his waistcoat pocket. He would twirl it round. He would guess the time and flick it open, and he was always right. But he didn't always just trust that watch that he would place inside of his waistcoat. He would look up to the clock and smile and watch the steam arising and think of the food that his mother would bring back from the kitchen.